Well, it seems like every year in the late summer, I have an abundance of basil growing, and I always like to put it up so that I can use it later in the winter. I like to use it for my Christmas lasagna because I love to make lasagna around Christmas time, and I also used it last year in one of my videos when I made winter spinach lasagna for you. So when I see my basil start to show signs of bolting, which means it just has like a little flower starting to form in the center, I will go ahead and cut it back down at the bottom where two other basil stems are starting to bush out, and that way if the basil wants to continue to try to grow, it can. And most times though, it gets a little bit tough and leathery, so I always like to plant other basil in other pots so that I have nice new basil always growing. Now before I get started putting up my basil, I am going to wash it very well because you never know what's growing up underneath those leaves. I have found worms before, I have found aphids, so I always give it a really quick wash, and I am going to freeze it. That's my preferred method of storing my basil. And so I will start by just putting together here some ice water, and I like to put my colander right down in there, and then in some boiling water I am going to just blanch this basil. I usually boil it for about 30 seconds to 1 minute, and then I'll just plunge it right into the ice water. Now these are the large leaf basil leaves, and so I like to make usually about one sheet of these, and then I will just freeze them individually. This is rather time consuming, so I don't do all of my basil this way, just the large leaf. I like to make sure it's dry. I'll put it on parchment paper, put it in my deep freezer for a day, and it comes out nice and frozen, and then I'll just pop it into a Ziploc bag. I always try to remove as much of the oxygen from the bag as possible before I put it back in the freezer. And I'll leave 2 links below the video so that you can also look at other ways you can remove your oxygen from your bags if you don't have a food saver. And then the other way I like to put up my basil is just to blanch it first, and these are the smaller leaves. I'll just go ahead and blend these down in just a little bit of water, and then I'll transfer these to ice cube trays, and I typically use these for soups and stews. The other ones with the large leaf basil, I like to just cut those into things like sauces where I want that little bite of basil. I notice that the flavor just is much better for me if I freeze basil versus drying it. So this is just 2 very easy ways that you can preserve your basil so that you can use it in the winter. And then another way is just to take about 2 cups of white wine vinegar, and you can warm this up in a saucepan. Just don't bring it to a boil, just gently bring it to a little steam, and then you can cut your basil leaves in there, about a cup of basil leaves. And once your vinegar starts to steam, just go ahead and transfer it to a mason jar, and you can leave this on your counter for about a couple of days or so. Some people leave it out for 3 or 4 weeks to steep, so it really infuses that vinegar. I found that just a few days is just fine. And then I just strain out the basil leaves, put it in another jar, and it is ready for salads, and I can make homemade mayonnaise with it. A lot of different things you can do with flavored vinegars. So I hope you're able to use one of these ideas. And if you have a lot of fresh basil right now and you want some different ways or ideas for using it, you're welcome to head on over to my channel where I have a playlist over there specifically for basil to show you ways that I have used it too. And as always, if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe and share this on your favorite social media. I sure would appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching, and y'all have a beautiful day.